Hello everyone and welcome to Your Library at Home. My name is Sam Hagan and I'm part of the library's public programming team. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that we meet on country. I live and work on Gadigal land and I'd like to take this opportunity to pay my respects to elders past, present and especially emerging. And I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal Australians who may be joining us today. So, welcome to the latest in the library series of online author talks. We're getting quite used to seeing you all here. Hopefully you are visiting the library website regularly to keep an eye on what's coming up in our events and exhibitions. I can tell you that our World Press Photo exhibition is now open on site with social distancing. So if you would like to go into the library and see World Press Photo, now's your chance. Tonight, we've got a really special treat. In a minute, I'm going to introduce Nicole Abadee, who will be in conversation with Aminata Conteh-Biger about Aminata's new book, Rising Heart. I happen to know that this is a really special night for these two fantastic women who are both really proud and should be proud of this great new publication. So as usual, I'll see you again at the end to moderate the Q&A, but now I'm going to introduce Nicole. Nicole Abadee is a book critic, festival moderator, podcaster, and literary consultant. She currently writes about books and other things for The Good Weekend. And she has a new podcast series and it's called Books, Books, Books. And it's available on Apple Podcasts, Google, and Spotify. I'd like to welcome Nicole to Your Library at Home. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, Sam. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So it's my very great pleasure to welcome here tonight Aminata Conteh-Biger. I am delighted to be here at the State Library with Aminata virtually to interview her. Aminata is a writer, activist and philanthropist, and tonight we're going to be talking about her extraordinary memoir, Rising Heart, published this week by Pan Macmillan. Aminata is my dear friend and it's a great privilege to be here speaking to her tonight. Aminata, welcome.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Before we begin, I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we would normally be meeting, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Before we start our conversation, I'd like to introduce you to Aminata. Aminata was born in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone, in 1980. From 1991 to 2002, Sierra Leone was racked by a civil war which claimed over 50,000 lives. Aminata was a victim of that war. In 2000, she arrived in Australia as a refugee, the first female refugee from Sierra Leone to arrive and to settle here in Australia. She was 20. She has made a wonderful life for herself here. We're going to hear a little bit about that. And in 2014, she founded the Aminata Maternal Foundation, a not-for-profit organisation to raise funds for mothers and their babies in Sierra Leone, which has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. Aminata, welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much.
So we're going to start by talking a little bit about your childhood. Your parents divorced when you were 3 and your mother moved away. So you were really raised by your father, Pa Conteh. You call him in your book your ultimate role model. What was he like?
Well, my father, Pa Conteh, which his name was Yaya, in real life, he was a true living hero. I think the reason why I really use that word because of the values that he left in all of his children and also the people that he was around. But my father was a very disciplined person. Education was extremely important to him, but also it was the way that he nurtured and loved his children and people that he met in the street or businesses, how he treated people. So those are values that I've also that he has instilled in me that I'm passing on to my children. But he was loving and caring, but most of all, he was the most giving human being I've ever met. And the way he gives, it was not ordinary for us children to see. We were just amazed that I actually thought my father's job was giving, helping people. So I always admired that, because I saw the respect and the joy, and he gives without not wanting for any kind of recognition for what he does. So it's more the discipline, the legacy that he has left us, which is all the children. When we sit today, that's all we talked about. It's very important to us, all of us. Yeah.
Aminata, something that comes through very clearly in the book, and it's certainly obvious to me who knows you, that kindness was something that was very important. And that was something he taught you was really the most important thing, wasn't it? That you should always be kind to other people.
Yes, kindness, treating people with respect, especially your elders. So I find it hard when I came to Australia to call people by their first name. It was incredibly hard because we were not allowed to. Kindness, but also giving. That we should be, what was the point of having so much if you could not give it away? So those values were on the top of the list, and then education. So for me, I have lived by that every single part of my life. Every time I meet new people or meet people in the street, I can't differentiate how I meet a beggar in the street and somebody who is in the bank or wearing suit. So I've hold that really very closely, and I've always said that most of the beautiful things that appears in my life are people that I don't know out of nowhere that will really show up always for me. So it is working.
And Aminata, he was a very protective father, wasn't he? He was especially very protective of you, you say. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
I think the reason why that is so important, and it's because most of the time, especially coming from Sierra Leone, so I will speak of Sierra Leone, the fathers really put the sons on a pedestal. Like the daughters were not meant to go to school or finish school because they're going to get married. So for my dad, he really reversed that. His daughters were the most precious. Like none of us knew who were his favorite. He has 9 children, but he really changed that way of the way we think of boys and girls. So it was very wonderful to experience, but then see others parents do completely different. So he wanted us to have education because he believed with us having education, we will be able to live by ourselves and also provide, not depending on a man. That means having that. So which is something that we all, especially all the girls now, 6 girls, all of us are fully independent, and we see that in the differently to the boys. And so that was something, that was a gift, pure gift.
Aminata, I know that you had a very happy childhood. Civil war broke out in Sierra Leone in 1991. For some years it didn't really affect you, but in January 1999, when you were 18, the rebels captured Freetown and they occupied the city for 3 weeks. And during that time, I understand your father took in hundreds of people to your family home. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
That was also a representative of who he was. We woke up this day when the rebels have attacked the capital city, and that was a time when you will probably keep your children safely. But I remember my father saying, we have to open the gate so people will come in. And I think what really has struck me with this story is because our house was massive. It was big. It was the biggest house in the area. All the other houses were being burnt. And this big house was the one place you should actually not go to hide at all, because it can be seen by the rebel. It's just standing there and it's bright and yellow. But yet everybody that was running away, we didn't know them, wanted to come to our house to hide. And also the most the beauty that I see in that, it took over 3 weeks in the most intense time of the war that the rebels did not knock at this door. Only at one time at the end when they were pushing the rebels that they had to, one of them just took notice of the house that all of a sudden they saw this house. And then they asked everybody to come out. And if we were not coming out, they were going to burn the house. So that's when everyone had to get out and stand in this small field.
How many of you were there, Amy? How many were sheltering the house at that time?
When I speak to my sister and my brother, we were still in shock because we didn't know how much people we actually had. We know it was full and people were sleeping on the floor. It was dead quiet because you are living in the middle of a place where all the houses are being burned. You're smelling body being roasted. You're seeing outside, but because our house have a tinted window like a bulletproof, so the rebels could not see us from the inside. We could see from the outside. So when that time came for everybody to come out because they were literally going to burn the house, they have petrol, we were in shock how many people have been hiding in there. It was almost like you opened a small bottle and a water flowing, but keep flowing. And I think the rebels themselves were really shocked. And as we jumped through the other fence, the backyard, and then end up again at there was a small park. It was a small empty field just next to our house. And I still cannot believe over 1,000 of people were just there. I don't know where they came from, but they've been living at our house for weeks.
And you were standing there holding onto your father's hand, and a man who you now know as Daramy saw you and said, "You come here." Could you tell us what happened then?
So when Daramy looked at me, I knew. And the reason why I knew it was this look as like instant possession, like all of a suddenly. So when I locked eyes with him and I saw him walking through, by the time he said, "You come here," I let go of my dad's hand. But at that time, he had already captured 4 other girls who were waiting on the side. And so when I let go of my dad's hand, his hand was shaking because he had Parkinson. So I was holding it. The reason why I was holding onto his hands to stop it from shaking. So when I let go, and the reason why I had to let go is because we knew incidents that have happened that most of the time they will rape the girls in front of the parent, or ask the parent to do the same, or shot the dad. Or so those stories were there in my head, and I knew letting go and walking towards him, I knew I had my body just react to that. It was a time when I felt this is a time that I can protect my father without knowing it. But my whole body knew it, and I had to just move towards the NIG. And I never saw my dad's face because I was afraid of looking at his face. I knew how this man had protected us. We never left the house. We were driven to school and brought back to school. I never go to the market even. So everything, he was very careful about everything, our surrounding. And all of a sudden, that has been taken away from him. And he knew, of course, what was going to happen to me. So just departing from him and not turning back and look, I still don't know how I did that, but that was myself protecting.
And Aminata, you also knew what you were walking into, didn't you? Because there'd been such fear amongst the young women of Sierra Leone that you knew that the rebels were coming looking for young women. You said especially for women who were virgins, to take them away. And so a lot of you had tried to look older, or you'd smeared coal on your face, or you dressed as men. So you knew what the consequences were as you left your father and walked towards Daramy. Yes,
there is something that happens when, even when you know the effect of being, if you have seen stories, and when it happens in that time, because the stories that we have heard, we know they're real. But when it happens to you, that moment, and knowing that that was a huge possibility, and I didn't have time because I was such a small girl, so I didn't have time to really dress up. Or my sister dressed up very old. She put some ashes. So a lot of people put some charcoal or ashes on their face.
And that was to make their faces look darker because they were more interested in women with lighter skin, you said.
Skin. And also they will make the hair really rough and so they look more acting like a crazy, somebody who is not well up there, and look unattractive. So I didn't have the time to do that. So, but I knew also that when they come, I knew in a way that I was going to be taken, because they look for younger girls, very young, between 9. It doesn't matter whether you're 9-year-old, you're 10 years old, we just take them away because they wanted to be the person that vaginates the girl.
Aminata, after you were kidnapped, they held you in captivity for some months. I don't want, and I'm sure no one else wants, to hear the graphic details of what happened to you, but could you give us some idea of what happened during those months?
Those months were very hectic time because, and the chaos was, the cloud was, the firing and the smell and the cars and bodies you seen in that moment, because it was so intense. It was full of chaos, full of screaming. And as you move from every place, you see incidents happening. In Sierra Leone, one of the most theme of the war was to cut people's hands and asking if you want a short sleeve or long sleeve. That means the length of where they were going to cut off. So you're passing through those scenes.
So if you said you wanted a short sleeve, they'd cut off your arm. If you said you wanted a long sleeve, they'd cut off your hand.
Yes.
So that, I'm sorry, go on. So tell us about...
So when you're in Sierra Leone, you still see that. People walking around with limbs. Every time we go, we see that. So that was very known. But you're walking in between every scene. You see somebody lying, being raped. You see somebody being shot next to you. So almost what happened is the person that kidnapped you, you're almost closer to him. It's like they are protecting you. Because if some other rebels saw you, they might take you. But because I was in the group of the army, so I cannot be taken. So you're coming close to the person that have kidnapped you. In your head, they're protecting you at the same time, because the moment you go to another rebel saw you by individual, they probably shot you or take you away. So that became, for those couple of days, and then as we keep going to the bush where we have to change all our clothes and has to be camouflaged to green or dark, they don't want to see you wear white or any bright colors, because then you're bringing signal to the government that are flying the helicopter, they will just shot you. So we had to change very quickly to what we were wearing in something darker. But every day, every night was a different scenario, and sleeping next to a dead body, or going for days or week without any meal, and looting. We have to go to people's house who have run away and see if there's any food. So it became more like that for those couple of months.
And Aminata, as well as the sexual abuse, they used you and the other women as human shields, didn't they?
Yeah, so the main reason why they choose civilians or girls was to be used as sexual slaves. So the moment they caught you, you are the wife. So you become the wife. But also when the government and the rebels are fighting, they put the civilians at the front, and then they give you guns. So then the government doesn't know who is, because the rebels do not have uniform. They wear normal clothes. So you have to, so there's a lot of casualty, but most of the time the government knew that was the setting, especially during this time. But especially young boys who have been brainwashed and drugs, and who probably most of them have seen their parents being killed in front of them, or they have killed their parent, because that's one way that they try to really brainwash the boys or the young rebels, which were very dangerous than the older rebels, the leaders.
You make the point in your book, Aminata, you've just referred to the drugs, that particularly with the young child soldiers, that they fueled them up with cocaine so that it was almost like they could, well, to drive them into a real frenzy so that they almost lost their humanity. That's how you describe it, isn't it?
Yes, they lost. You can, when you look into a child soldier's eyes, you see not all the innocence is completely wiped away. You do not want to provoke them. You don't even want to talk to them because they can just shoot just like that for fun and laughing. So you know already what has been done to them, and they also use the gunpowder, the cartridge. They take that as drugs also. Oh. So there's so many things that have gone wrong with these boys that I would rather see a group of adult soldiers and rebels and go to their camp than these boys, because they don't know how to probably rape a woman and leave you. They would just use knife and slaughter you. So it was really horrifying to see that in a child that you can just hold together and cannot move, but you can't do that. And you can see how much they've been destroyed, their mind, and the pain also, what they've gone through with their family members. So, yeah.
Aminata, eventually after some months you were released. You were part of a group with some other children who were released in exchange for food and supplies from the government forces that were provided to the rebels. You were eventually reunited with your father at your family home. What was that like?
That I think in my story, I believe in my story that it's been a painful memory for me, because even though I was released and I was looking forward to come home, and I don't even know what to do with that scene, coming home, and knowing that my dad was alive. I knew my dad was alive because we listened to the radio when we were kidnapped. We listened to BBC News. And I knew my grandfather has been brutally killed. So I knew for some reason that my father was alive. So I remember coming home, we have all the neighbors really excited, because they were only really 17 children. So I was part of that, and I was not a child. So I remember my stepfather, who was in the army, went and got me, and we got home, and my neighbors were standing outside rejoicing, but really just standing still. And I remember just walking home to the gate, climbed the stairs, and my dad was sitting on this beautiful leather chair that I always remember of him. And I did not recognize him. He was shaking, and he has been really deteriorated, very small. He was a chubby man. His joy has just disappeared. And he felt so blessed that two of his children has been given back to him. So when I saw him, my dad, he's a very vulnerable man. He cries. That's something we knew of him. He was not able to express the joy, but he knew that his daughter, something has been taken away from his daughter, and he felt like he failed. I think that really destroyed my dad, that he failed to protect, meaning that he rather would have died than to see me being taken. He should have fought and been killed to know that he fought to stop. I think he really preferred that he was killed to protect his daughter, but he was not able to do that.
Aminata, you then went to Guinea to spend some time with your mother, who was living there, and you found something out there that caused you great concern and that made you realise that it wasn't possible for you to go back to Sierra Leone and to stay there. What was that? What did you learn?
So when I came back to Guinea...
I'm so sorry. Would you like to take a moment? Would you like to get a glass of water or something?
Some tea here, thank you.
Thank you for being so brave.
Thank you. When I got back to Guinea, I I was very isolated. I wanted not to be known in the community because there was a lot of refugees, and because of the way I was released on television. So I stayed quietly. And I remember my sister's fiance at the time has let us know that Darami has gone back looking for me, because the reason...
And that was at your dad's home in Sierra Leone, in Freetown.
Sierra Leone, asking for me.
He turned up there asking for you.
Turned up at my house. So twice he had turned up, because his possession, and that's what happened, because when they capture you, when they get that possession, they feel like they own you. So between my release, he didn't know I was released. So the incident that had happened in the book, he has gone away and I've been released just that minute. So, and I didn't understand his obsession until when my friends who I was kidnapped with, when I met them in Guinea, and said he was sick, totally sick, when I got released without him not knowing. They said he almost lose his mind. So I really understood the depth of obsession when he had to come back to my house and start looking for me. And the UN thought that my life was at risk. They had to really try to get me out of the country or any part of Africa really quickly.
And that was when you realised, wasn't it, that you couldn't stay in Sierra Leone, that probably you couldn't stay anywhere in Africa?
No, he could, because he continued to look for me until 2011.
So in 2000, you'd applied to the United Nations Refugee Program, and they arranged for you and your sister to come here to Australia. Did you choose Australia, or did somebody suggest it to you? And what did you know about Australia at that time?
I know nothing of Australia. I was very familiar with Europe and the United States. So when the conversation came in with UNHCR, the American program was ready, Canada and UK, and then they said Australia, and I said, where is that country? And because I was living in Guinea-Conakry, so when they say Australia, I got the accent of Australia. They pronounce it Australia. So then I thought, okay, Austria, because my mom has been in Austria before. So then I go, okay, I'll go to Austria. And they were very concerned as to why. And then I remember telling the head of UNHCR, I said, well, I don't want people to know my story. I don't want my community to know I was that girl on television. I wanted to come to a new place where I can start fresh. And also I didn't want, I wanted people to help me without knowing who my story was, what my story was. And I didn't want that pity. I wanted to start fresh. I wanted to get everything done on my own. And they were really surprised, because they thought being with my community would have helped. But I knew that would not have helped, because I wanted to really stay away from my story for a while and get back to my education and going back to school. But there was an independency that have come into my being that I didn't understand, because I was brought up by my father doing everything for me, but all of a sudden I wanted to live on my own. So coming to Australia, this is how I end up here. And one thing I knew was the Olympics was going to start. And I was like, okay, I don't know what the Olympics is, but I was happy to experience it. Yeah.
I want to take you back a moment, something that we didn't mention. You talked a few times about being on TV. Let's just make that clear for people who are watching, that at the time when you were released in exchange for food and supplies, all of that was televised, wasn't it? So yeah. Throughout Sierra Leone.
Yes, it was televised, because when I got released, I was given a letter to give to the government, and the rebels said that had to be read on the news. If not, my friends that I've left behind will be killed. So I have been released, but then I have this burden to carry, so it had to be read on the news. So my father and friends find out that it was actually me on television, on the national television. That's when they saw that, oh, she's really here. That's when a lot of family knew who was released.
And that's what gave you a particular profile that made it probably easier in a way for Darami to find out about
Yes.
what had happened to you.
Yes.
So for that reason, you were selected to come to Australia as part of the UN Refugee Program. You were the first woman from Sierra Leone. You came here with your sister, and you arrived in 2000, which was the year of the Olympics,
Yes.
when you were 20. How did you feel about leaving Sierra Leone and your family behind?
when I said goodbye to my family, and even when I saw my dad in Guinea, I saw my dad for the second time. He was coming to London for treatment. He had cancer. He had cancer also. I didn't think I was ever going back. Not because I don't want to go back, but it was almost like leaving was the end of it. So I didn't know if I was going to come back. That moment, it was, and I really believe that's what most refugees or migrants go through when they resettle in a country. You're thinking of that moment. So I didn't, there was no feeling of missing anything. I knew something inside me had changed. I don't know what it was, but it was not me going back or going any other place. I was just focused on the present, and that is coming to a place and getting my life sorted.
So you came with your sister, and you were actually 20, but they wound your age back to 16 so that you could go to school and try to find a place in Australia. What was life like for you here in Australia, Aminata, in those first few years?
When I arrived, of course, I knew I was safe. That was something that I felt straight away, even though not having understanding where I am at. I knew I was safe, and I just went into this mode of just going into life as it continues. So I didn't have more to think about. But I think even coming when I arrived in Australia a week after, and I had traveled, but then I have not been told about having jet lag, like not sleeping. So when I experienced not sleeping, because it was the first time to travel that long, it was 3 days, went through France and Singapore. So because I was not sleeping, I had so much memory coming back. Then I actually thought, my life is not real. Like me being here, I'm in this country. But then it became a time when I thought, have I made a mistake to come to a country? There's no one here, even though I came with my sister, but we've both gone through different experiences.
She got a job, didn't she? She got a job in a nursing home.
Yeah, she got a job. She went to school straight away because our dad has really instilled that kind of independent, So she got on with life right away. And for me, I was juggling. I have to go to school. I have to pay my bill. And I have to, with this amount of money that I was getting to Centrelink, but I was just going through it as time goes, but it was extremely difficult. And I cried every day. And my dad, talking to my dad in London, he was very worried that he knew I was alone and I was struggling, but I have to hide that struggling from him also. But it was extremely difficult. I didn't have words for it. But I think the most challenging thing was I've been told I was traumatized, but I don't know what traumatized means. That was a new word for me. What does that mean if I'm traumatized? So then I have to say counseling. Okay, I'm sitting with a counseling that is listening to me have to tell my story. I didn't know what that meant. And then the counselor, we said, I understand what you've gone through. Then I'm thinking to myself, how can you understand what I've gone through? You've never been in a war. So there was all this emotion that I was going through that I don't know where to put it. But then life keeps going on. So I have to continue to move on with it.
So you finished school, took you a little while to find work. You did some modelling work, and then you got a job, your big breakthrough with David Lawrence, the wonderful clothing shop, sadly not in existence anymore, but you got a job at the David Lawrence shop at the airport, and you loved that because you'd always loved fashion and clothes. And then in February 2007, you met a Frenchman called Antoine. Could you tell us about how you met?
So I met Antoine at the Sydney Opera House at the bar. I love going out by myself. I think when I came to Australia, I had to adjust to that life, going out by myself. So I've been to Bondi, and that day was a beautiful sunny day by myself. And I got the train, and as I drove to Circular Quay, I just got in the train. Let me come out. It's still beautiful. So I remember spending the whole evening there. And as I was walking through, a jazz music was playing, and I stood up at the terrace watching down the opera bar, and I just this person with this most beautiful smile just came up to me and said, "Oh, hi," and I just turned, and he has this smile that his eyes lit up, He saw me, he was with his friend, and his friend was waiting for him. And we start talking, and he went back and tell his friend to go, and we spent 3 hours speaking. He did not speak any English, but I understood French because my mom is from Guinea-Conakry. And we became really good friends, and we dated, and then he went back to France a couple of months after.
And when he went back to France, he left something behind, did he? But it wasn't something that you found for a few years. What did he leave behind?
So when we lived together for a couple of weeks, he took a time because he doesn't speak English. He took a time to write a letter about how he felt. So for me, I just liked him, and I'm having a good time with him. So he left this letter professing how he felt, and he counts how many days he has met me, and he hid this letter. But I did not find this letter 4.5 years back when we reconnected, and it was. And where he put it, I just don't go and look into that drawer very much. So that was incredibly shocking to me. And what I understood was when he got to France, he called me all the time. I didn't understand why he was calling me in that form. So he was waiting for my expression. But of course, I have not seen the letter.
I don't want to spoil the story, but we'll jump ahead and say in 2011, he returns to Sydney and you are together again.
Yes.
I want to take you now to 2009, when you meet a woman who has become very, very important in your life. By this time, you were doing some work for the UN High Commissioner of Refugees, the Australian branch, and you, in 2009, were invited to give a speech at Parliament House at their Mother's Day event. And that was the first time that you had really shared your story and talked about publicly about what had happened to you. And you met a woman who has become very important to you, who was very interested to hear about your story. Who was that?
Rose Horens. So I met Rose. I spoke, told my story for the first time. And at those times too, I will not use the word rape. Rape was the word that I never used. So when I spoke, I didn't know what I said. And Rose and her daughter were in tears. A lot of people were in tears. And for me, it was very different. Why would I tell my story and people were in tears? And Rose came up to me and told me, said that he would want to hear more of my story. And I've never really expanded my story beyond when I said I was kidnapped. I would just say I was kidnapped and let people use their own imagination. So since then, Rose and I, of course, became really close friends. I spent my first Christmas with her right away. It was a beautiful experience to go through the Jewish land about the Jewish holiday. And but she's such a person that is in your space. So we connected right away and told me she would like to hear a few women refugee stories. And really, that's how we started working on the book at the Hills.
So Roz is a theatre and was a very well-known, it still is, very well-known theatre director. She started to work with you and 3 other African women refugees who'd also been victims of sexual violence to create a piece of theatre. She brought a counsellor in to work with you, and together you worked, and eventually over a long period, you worked together for almost 5 years, I think, on that play, which became the Balcombe Hills African Ladies Troupe. In that, you all played yourselves, telling your own stories, but the tragic stories were interspersed with music and with song because you wanted there to be something very beautiful. The play opened in Riverside Theatre in Parramatta in May 2013. I am going to jump ahead and say by that stage, you and Antoine were married and you were pregnant with your second child. You got up on stage and you, for the very first time, told your story in all of its detail. How did that feel, Amy?
It was really an experience that I think none of us, the 4 women, were expecting. And Ross did such a brilliant job because we go in telling the story thinking that it was just a workshop, and then we start telling it. I think what was so incredible about those times, and every time we share those stories, for me, it's other people coming to me and said that happened, and thank you. And I knew the importance of me for what I get from that, I knew the importance of me telling my story, but mostly the truth of my story, that when I share my story, I'm also sharing somebody else's story. And I'm also putting people in a journey as to thinking where they were when things like that was happening. Because as we live as human, things are happening all around the world, but where are you at that time? And also we learn that through storytelling, there's healing that happens also. The documentary has gone into many countries, and the Boca Mills documentary, and is helping.
So yeah, Ros made a documentary about the making of the play. So the theatre,
yes.
I'll let people read about that in the book, or some people I'm sure will have heard about the Balcombe Hills African Ladies Troupe. But you went to London, and Ros made a documentary about that, which was shown. You said something very strong in your book, that for the first time in telling your story on stage like that and playing yourself, for the first time you were not ashamed, and you felt as if finally you had been released from your captivity. I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that feeling?
Yes. Again, that feeling, it's what makes me choose to come to Australia, because even though I was in a country that was safe, but I felt like a chain all over my body all the time. Because when people look at you, you wonder if they know what has been taken away from you. And you carry that shame, and you carry a guilt too. For me, beautiful was the word I was scared of. I didn't want that when people compliment me beautiful, and that was the thing that everybody said to me when they met me. But the moment I stood on that stage and said outly that I was raped, my first intimacy experience was by 6 or 7 men, and all those things, the chain cracked open. I knew that the shame and the guilt was something that was holding me back. So I felt this liberation that happened that was really suppressing my joy. But also I was imprisoned by these people. The people that, Darami and many of these men that have done that to me, they were still holding me as prison, and I didn't want to give that power again to them. Because how can you be in a beautiful, loving country and you have all these things around you, but inside you are in prison? I knew I had forgiven, but I knew the shame was holding me back. So me saying those words that I was raped, knew it did not take my dignity away. And I knew that they didn't break me because they didn't make me. So that became very clear to me, that I can use my voice in telling my story on behalf of other women. So that was, and Ros was with us in those journeys. She would cry, she would get angry. I think that was the most beautiful part with Ros. She would get angry with us together. She would cry, the emotions to come out, and we see her struggle. She really walked with us. She really showed up with us when she would tell us, if this is too much, let's stop it. We knew we were not bound to do it. We can stop it anytime. So that was a pure freedom also to experience.
She created a very safe space, didn't she, by bringing in a trauma counsellor. And so it was not just her who was giving you that comfort and support, but an experienced counsellors that worked with you.
Yes, absolutely. That was provided for us. But I think what was so important with our relationship with Ros is that at the end of the day, those counselors leave, but she checked on every single person. She was available, even this was new for her. She was hearing things that didn't even come into the documentary. So we had that relationship with her, but we knew also it was too much for her at a point also, because there's so much people can absorb for you, and when they love you and when they carry the pain with you and the frustration. So that was beautiful to have that, not somebody just doing a career, but somebody that was there knowing that these stories are important, the human story, not just to be told and get it over with. So yeah.
So Aminata, not only did you participate in that theatre, partly as a way of helping yourself, but also to help other women that had gone through similar experiences. In the meantime, and I am skipping ahead, you built a wonderful, happy family life for yourself with your beautiful Antoine, your first child, Sarafina, and your second child, Matisse. And over that period, it was becoming more and more clear to you that you wanted to do something. You wanted to be of service. You'd been back to Sierra Leone. You'd seen what things were like there. You wanted to help the people and the women of Sierra Leone. And then it's from that that the idea for the Aminata Maternal Foundation was born. I want to go back, first of all, and ask you about the birth of Sarafina and what that was like for you.
The birth of Sarafina was extremely, it started, of course, a lot of women that will go through childbirth as a joyful, because you're looking forward to see that beautiful, precious baby to hold. And the moment has come where it became so, it changed its course, and it became really a traumatizing experience where we thought I was going to lose my life. She was going to lose her life. And I could sense the doctors in the room. I had 7 doctors in the room that was monitoring us. And as Sarafina was pulled, she was pulled by a doctor that didn't even have time to wear gloves. So she injured her right hand. And
Sarafina, her shoulder was injured as she was born.
Yes. And so she injured in her right hand, but she was the most perfect baby to me. And that experience, I heard a lot. There was a case study happening. They were talking about maternal health. And coming from Africa, we don't have words for these things, you know. So when I got home with her, I wanted to know why. I had 7 doctors in the room to make sure that I survived. And I started seeing these horrifying videos of mothers and babies. And also at the process, I learned that Sierra Leone have one of the most highest infant and maternal mortality. And I did not, in my brain and in my spirit, I did not understand why a mother or woman should die, or their child, because of poverty. And for myself, I think I knew something really light up in me, that I can do something. I didn't know what, but I knew that I want to do something. And for 8 years, that has been my journey. And yes.
What did you do? Tell us a little bit about the foundation that you set up.
First of all, the first thing that I wanted to do was to learn, to understand why a mother and a child, or why I would have died, she would have died if I was in Sierra Leone, but not in Australia. So I learned maternal infant mortality death is preventable. So we did a lot of research as to why. But then when we started setting it up, so it took me 3 years to just go through that process and set up the foundation. And I will partner with a hospital that does everything completely free. We're the second busiest maternal hospital in Sierra Leone.
And that was a maternal hospital that had already been set up by another Scottish organisation.
Yes.
But your foundation partnered with that organisation, and funds that you raised then went to that maternal hospital.
The maternal hospital. So I wanted to do that. I didn't want to go and reinvent the wheel. So I found somebody who is doing a brilliant job, but also doing it for free, because I knew the problem was women do not have money to go to the hospital to have a baby. So I wanted a hospital that will provide a high quality, but also cost free. And so it took me a long time to research and find this woman, Anna Globe. She is just the most incredible human being in this world, and does phenomenal job. She works in Sierra Leone, Malawi, Madagascar, and in Kenya. So I only work with her, we partner with her only in Sierra Leone. And the reason what I did that for is to expand the work that she has started to do it together with the Aminata Maternal Foundation. So in Sierra Leone, 1 in 17 women die through childbirth. And in Australia, it's 1 to 8,700. And that, for me, it's just not right. And when I look at how these things are preventable, so that just doesn't sit well with me. So we fund 15% of the hospital. So as people read the book, they will see the vision that is there, and I am determined to make sure that comes to light.
I also encourage all of you who are watching and listening to read Aminata's wonderful book. A part of the proceeds of the book are going towards her foundation, the Aminata Maternal Foundation, and I urge all of you also who are not already supporters to have a look at that website and the amazing work that the foundation does. Aminata, you say a few times in your book that by telling your story first on stage and now in your book, you've done something that most African women would never do. Why not?
I think because I understand, I know the shame they are going through, and I know for me, I believe my dad really created a space for us and gave us that liberty. I have a family that is incredibly supportive, and I know that by me telling a story, I'm telling other women's story. I remember yesterday, my friend who I was kidnapped with called me, and she said to me, I can never bring myself to do what you're doing. And I'm not saying thank you, because I know what you are doing is giving yourself so much, because when I hear you tell that story, it brings back a lot of memory. So when I spoke to her yesterday, I can see what that is doing to her. Even she has a beautiful life, but she's still tied up with this shame that she could not express it, even if it's to one person. And for me telling that story and her seeing my story, it's sort of a little bit of freedom for her, that she feels like that is a mirror to what she has gone through. So when I do that, I know it's heavy, I know it's hard on my body, but I also feel like I have been placed in a space where I know I have a lot of love people around me that cares for me and love me, but also that cannot be enough. I know I have to put myself, or else the women of Sierra Leone have gone through so much. Like when I think of things that I've seen, and we in places like Australia, and people don't know about this story, one of the most vicious what happened. So if that's what I had to go through to tell the story of my people, that is something that I'm willing to do. And I'm glad that it is getting that people want to hear it in places like Australia and hopefully around the world. But I know in life, one person have to go through for others to benefit. And I hope that is my prayer. I hope that is what I'm doing, and will bring a lot of healing. So, yeah.
Aminata, on behalf of all of us listening, thank you for your courage.
Thank you
for sharing your story with us tonight. Thank you for your beautiful book. I hope that it's widely read. I'm sure it will be. I know that you've had quite a lot of media coverage already, and I just wish you all the very, very best. And I just applaud your bravery and your courage. Thank you for talking to me. And I think that now Sam Hagan is going to ask you some questions that have come from the audience. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Aminata. That was just the most amazing story to listen to and feel your presence through it. So thank you so much for sharing. I do have a couple of questions from people, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
The first one is, someone's asked, do you have any advice for young refugee children who have come to Australia and may be experiencing some of the feelings that you experienced?
I think the advice that I will give is that they have to have people around them that love them. I had that right away when I came to Australia with the Dwyer family, Michael Dwyer and Janelle Dwyer. They were a family that just welcomed me in their home right away. And I think that created a safety for me from the beginning. And to know that I have that love, like a family figure that would show up for me. But it is incredibly hard, because when you come to a beautiful country like Australia, you're getting used to a lot of ways how to navigate through life. So a lot, speaking for myself, a lot of refugees have really suppressed, and I did that. I suppressed it. And I didn't understand why people were telling their story. When I go to UNHCR and breakfast, I didn't understand why people tell their story, because first of all, I thought to myself, why should I tell my story when a lot of people have gone through that? am I being a self-centered person? So I didn't understand why people would do that. You don't do that back home. So, but it took me, I've been here now for over 20 years. So it takes time. And the time meaning is we have to get to know these people first before their story. And I had that. You got to know those refugees, how they grew up, their family members, than just going straight to the war, because they are trying to absorb it to in their head what has gone through. It's a total shock for them. But all of a sudden they're in a beautiful country, which they're reminded about all the time. So they have to full on rush into it and get on with life. So I think that's the advice I would give, that if you're working with a refugee or somebody who have come from a war torn, because they've seen a lot, they might not have gone through what I've gone through, but they've seen too much.
Yeah. Seen too much. Thank you, Aminata. It's so great. This is a bit of a different question. Someone has, well, firstly, someone has said, thank you so much for sharing your story. You've really touched people. Another person has asked, how did you begin the writing process for your book? How did you start the book?
Well, the writing process came as, because my story has been in public for quite a bit. So there's a lot of material that makes it, I will not say easier, but for my ghostwriter Juliet Reading to capture it, and with Pan Macmillan also. But I think it was very important, and Pan Macmillan knew that I had to get a ghostwriter that I connect with, like just like I did with Rose, or when I met Nicole, it was almost like a glue, like a magnet. So that is very important. And also, for me, it was so important that I get to tell my story in the truest way, because I knew it would take another years for a refugee or somebody that looked like me to have this opportunity. So I wanted a ghostwriter that will make sure, that will not give me a permission, but when you're a refugee and immigrant in a country like Australia, you almost need a permission for everything to express. So, and she could not be any more perfect. So I had that. Everything has to be with a space that you are. And so once I met Juliet, I just saw her photo. I loved her right away after interview 4 people. So that was the process. And then meeting to tell the stories, I knew I could be vulnerable. I knew I could cry. I knew I could laugh. But then I'm not going to be treated differently with her. I don't like to be treated differently, or being treated like I'm broken. Like, oh, we can't say this. So I'm a normal person who have gone through an experience. So that was extremely important to me. I didn't want to be walked around like a eggshell. So, yeah.
I understand. A couple of people are asking you, what are your dreams, or what is your dream for your foundation? What would you really like to see happen with the foundation?
Oh, that is a beautiful question. I want to really, truly, I'm a big believer nothing is impossible. That's the story of my life. I want to end infant mortality in Sierra Leone. And the reason why I believe it can be done, it's because it's preventable. And I don't believe women should suffer anymore, but bringing the most joyful experience that you can bring into this world. And I really, I'm glad that question is coming more. I really believe it doesn't matter what part of the world you are, or woman is the fundamental basic right of a human being, that every human being should experience that despite poverty. So I call upon that all the time on my board. I am bold with that because I know it's possible, but I also know that it's not all my responsibilities for me to speak it and do the work and bring people through that journey for it to be done, because it is preventable and it is doable. Even cases like fistula is preventable by doing surgery. So that's the journey I am determined to take people with me. And in a place like Sierra Leone, you can see it so quickly. It's a country that have gone through a lot. We have close to 8 million people. But it's education, it's providing the resource for these women, so that because these women you cannot begin to imagine how capable they are to run their life, and it's just to give them the tools to build it. And I call upon all women around the world to say no to that, because this is not a war. It's not a war. It's childbirth, and it should be a joyful experience.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree with you more, Aminata. And I'm going to read out now the web address for the foundation so that people can visit that site.
Yes.
So if anyone is interested, it's www.Aminata Maternal Foundation, that's one word, AminataMaternalFoundation.org. So if anyone would like to visit that website and find out more, that's the place to go. We've actually run out of time. I have the very great pleasure of saying a very big thank you to Aminata. Thank you so much. And Nicole, thank you so much as well. We love having you work with us here at the library. Also, I do have a copy of the book.
Yes.
It is available online in the library bookshop, as well as other good bookstores around. Please, I encourage you all to go out, by it and have a read. Thank you both so much this evening, and thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you, Sam. An absolute honour. Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody have a wonderful evening and happy reading, and we'll see you all again really soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Sam. Bye, Aminata.
Bye, Nicole.